Reconvene. And our next item on the conference agenda is discussion of reclassification data. And this is something I know the board has been asking for some time. I know Mrs. Parker, it's been a while that we've been interested in this. So thank you for putting it together. I know that these kinds of requests involve work, and we appreciate the fact that when you do something, you want to do it right, and so we're glad to have it for this evening.
So last May, you received a board brief in regards to a reclassification flow and the criteria, a flow chart of how students get reclassified. And if you have that brief, or if you recall from that brief, one of the things they mentioned were there were 4 reasons for the challenges to reclassifying students. 2 of them had to do with money. 1 of them had to do with the genuine fear of what would happen to a student if an English learner if we redesignated them, and another one had to do with how it impacted the school's scores. We have not done a good job in this area. I'm going to be very, very frank with you. We're in the process right now of taking a look at not just the criteria that we have, which you'll find is pretty high. The cutoff score for our English language arts California standard test score is above what would be considered a proficient student in language arts. It's at 365 instead of 350. And I'm okay with the criteria, us setting the bar high. We have just not done a good enough job well, we collect the data, we find the students that meet these high benchmarks, and then we're not redesignating them for practices that have gone on in the district for a while. Dr. Drati and I are committed completely to changing this practice because we don't believe it benefits anybody. And given the time and your direct mandate tonight, we will return to our principles and be able to impose more influence over these types of duties, which are incredibly important to every single one of our English learners that meet this incredibly high criteria. But as you know, it has an incredible impact on their academic career. You have data in front of you about how our English learners fare compared to our Hispanic English-only students, compared to our Hispanic reclassified students. It's at the bottom right here, if you could scroll up a little bit. You'll notice that, and this happens year in and year out, and this is not just a local phenomenon. This is a statewide data that we see, that redesignated students score at a higher rate. More of them score proficient or advanced than our Hispanic English-only students that were initially seen as English-only students, and obviously our English learner students. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. So I didn't realize when I was looking at this that the English only means Hispanic English only?
We took this data from our population, and it's our Hispanic students that we polled of the English-only students. So if we look at our Hispanic population, and we parcel them out into 3 groupings, one being initially English-only students that we know as generational Hispanics, and our English learner students, and our redesignated English learner students, or fluent English proficient students, you'll find that our redesignated students, a higher percentage score at proficient or advanced.
Right.
And again, that's not a local phenomenon.
Okay.
Mrs. Parker.
Well, considering that they are not allowed to be redesignated, unless at some point they have scored proficient or advanced according to our criteria. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, I think that's almost showing that some of them may drop back below proficiency because when they're redesignated, you know, one of the criteria is you have to score above proficient. So that piece doesn't surprise me. One of the things that I would really like to see is like individual students over time, because what we're seeing is kind of a snapshot, like on a year to year, but if a student is not redesignated, even though they've met the criteria, which are really high, and I look at it and, you know, I assume by students eligible for reclassification, does that mean those are the students that have gone through the whole process?
Yes.
Or that they just started step one?
Say that
You
again.
know, the document's not up there right now, but there's that flow chart
Right.
that shows
That
what
one,
you have
yes.
to do. So this is the decision guide for reclassifying.
Right.
When you talk about students eligible for reclassification,
Right.
are you talking about students that have the ability to enter the flow chart, or are you talking about students that are at the yes all the way down until for some reason there's
Scroll down, please. We're talking about students that meet all of the criteria and get hung up right where it says teacher evaluation of student academic performance. A redesignation committee at each site with the support of the parent of the child make that ultimate decision.
So that's where you see the bottleneck. That's where you see the barrier going up. Sort of subjective, where judgment comes in on that.
Right.
And I guess, and I don't know if you know this from your experience as a principal or if there is any data on it. If a student hits that barrier, the first time that they're eligible, and then they go through the whole process the next year, are they going to hit that barrier again? Or will they then, are they more likely or almost guaranteed to be reclassified?
I wish I had an answer for you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It depends on an individual basis and from site to site. And I think that's our challenge that we have, is really sitting down with our principals and making it very clear to them what we expect in terms of this process. Because it's hit or miss. You could go to a school, you could go to Monroe, and the process might be a little different from what it is at Franklin or at Adams. But we have not been applying the district protocol to redesignating students, which we know is, after a while, it's a huge detriment to our students. Yes.
I'm sorry, I wanted you to talk a little bit about that, about what are the disadvantages to the students if they're not reclassified when it is appropriate for them to be reclassified.
Well, there's personal and there's academic. You know, you have a student that's achieving. You could potentially have a student that in the second grade could score advanced in language arts, and for some reason or another, they're just not redesignated because the school A doesn't have a committee that actually goes through this process, or B, year after year, a teacher says, no, we don't feel the student is up to par and should be redesignated. Whether the intent is genuine or malicious, the student will continue to matriculate through the grades from second all the way from what we've seen to high school and still be designated an English learner, which going into the secondary, they're placed into English learner classes. Leaving the junior high, they enter the high school having to take English learner classes. And again, from second grade, they could be an advanced student in language arts, reading better or performing higher than their English-only peers. And if we're not for their initial designation of an English learner, they would be in a grade level track, a college-bound track. That's a big problem. And personally, for a student, after a while, you can imagine is I'm scoring better or I read better than my other friends, and yet they still keep me in these classes that are far below. They're not challenging. They're not rigorous enough, so they check out. That's a problem.
Ms. Limon.
Mr. Hendel, you mentioned that some schools, it's a hit or miss if they have a committee or a group that's a redesignation committee. How do we address that? I mean, how do we think about that?
Well, Dr. Dradi and I are personally going to be meeting with our principals to ask who's on their committee, when their committees are meeting, what their process is in place, and if they don't, we're going to send them back to this document to show them what they need to have in place.
So is the piece that's lacking at some of our sites when you mentioned that we are not following our own protocol, is that the piece that's missing, or what piece are we not following?
The
That's-
will.
The will.
The will. It's the will.
That's a hard piece.
That's a big piece.
Now, you mentioned in your letter that some of that is because, or could be because, schools and districts benefit from having more students identified as EL.
There's a prevalent philosophy of some folks that feel if we redesignate students, they will lose the support of being an English learner student that entitles them to additional services and the school to additional funding, from Title III funding to LEP funding from the state, which per student works out to about $450 per student per year, which is a lot of money considering if you have 100 English learners at a site, you're looking at roughly $45,000, which some principals and some sites believe that you could provide a lot of support. But we have a district protocol in place, and we're either going to follow it or we're going to change it.
Yep.
And I don't think our protocol is something we need to change.
My question was going to be, do you think that that's happening in our schools right now?
That we're
That-
following protocol?
No. That we do have schools that are reluctant to reclass students because of their fear of losing funding.
Yes.
Okay.
Mrs. Parker?
Well, and I can see the, how easy it would be to lose sight of what's important, the individual student.
Right.
In this case, because principals in particular are trying to think of the greater good in that, the funding is there to help students. But I think that they need, teachers probably and principals need to reflect further on what a difference it makes to each student, that reclassification. And I guess that beyond just having the committee and talking about this in a general sense, it seems to me that they need some real specific training on, what outcomes can be if kids are classified and, or are not reclassified, and what they should really be looking at so that we have a district rubric and a common purpose at each school, and it's not varying dramatically from site to site. But I also want to say that, we can see, obviously, the 12-13 data is not, it's not end-of-year data, so it's not
No.
really showing us much.
No.
It's really the 10-11 to 11-12.
Right.
Where we're seeing a pretty dramatic jump up, almost doubling the number of students that we have reclassified.
Right.
And so I do want to appreciate the trend.
I appreciate the trend as well. Unfortunately, only reclassifying 57 students out of 445 eligible students, that is horrible.
This data came to light in a very vibrant way at a Santa Barbara County Superintendent's meeting.
Our
So,
district data?
Yes.
Mr.
Go ahead, Ms.
Mr.
Milan.
Handel, are there best practices? Do you see other things that other school districts are doing that we could do better?
I think the only piece right now, and we've had a lot of discussion with Dr. Cash and Dr. Dradi about this particular subject, the piece that's missing is the will of actually having these committees and applying our protocol. That, we've talked about everything about the actual criteria to be redesignated. We don't think that's the piece. The piece that we're getting stuck at is the actual redesignation, the application or the process of designating our students, having that committee meet and having them discuss every single student. And we've made this very easy for each site. Every single site each year gets the name of every single student that's qualified to be redesignated. They get the information. We give them the information year to year. We have just failed to take action on it.
One of the concerns I've heard in the past is that the pendulum will swing the other way, and all of a sudden we will be redesignating students who truly need to be in English language learner programs to receive that support.
We're not advocating that we just do a blanket redesignation of students that qualify. We do want committees to take a really good look at each and every student. But I think what we're seeing right now is, if you're telling me, not you specifically, but if we're saying to the public that less than 50% of the students that qualify with a very high criteria, I might add, I've spoken to a couple other districts in our area, and they've said their criteria was at a basic range at 300 cutoff score for qualifying to be redesignated, and ours is 365. So ours is real high. The rates that we're redesignating students, I don't believe is one that accurately projects the individual merit of every single student that's eligible. We need to do a better job of looking at every single student. And in the case of students that do get redesignated, and perhaps they shouldn't, they get monitored for 2 years. So we still have an opportunity. We're still looking at all students that we redesignate for 2 years to ensure that their transition to being what we call an RFEP, a redesignated fluent English proficient student, that their progress is continuing to trend up. And if not, we provide intervention and support.
Yeah, I would just like to say, I think it's pretty unconscionable, really. I mean, to see students being held back who have clearly demonstrated proficiency, and we know that if that happens early on, as you said, then later on, if students aren't challenged,
Right.
they're going to tune out of school. And these students that are making strides like this are among the highest achieving students we have, because they're overcoming this language, second language issue, and learning content at the same time. So I like the fact that you continue to monitor students after they've been reclassified, but and I think that's important data for us to have. But I think any child who's artificially held back just because of potentially some preconception about their ability to succeed is really something that should not be happening in our district at all.
I completely agree.
And I would agree. I think I've shared with Mr. Handel that in the last month I've had Spanish-speaking parents come to me and ask me about the family language form that they have to fill out at the very beginning of what's the primary language spoken at home, if it's English or Spanish. And parents actually in our district fear that if they check off Spanish, their student will be an English language learner their
Doomed.
entire time in our
They're doomed.
district. And that is scary to me. It's not okay, but it's a reality. So I agree with the comments that have been made.
Mrs. Parker?
Well, that also touches off on the number. To me, we aren't looking so much at how we compare to other districts in terms of the number of students that we even have start the process of
Right.
being eligible. So, the ones that do stay classified as EL because they can't even get their foot in the door on that flow chart. So I think that's something that we need to be thinking about as well. I mean, what I can see is that last year, almost 100% of the kids that were eligible for reclassification in secondary were reclassified.
Yes.
And so where I see the difference now is between elementary and secondary, where only 50% of the kids that were eligible last year were reclassified. And I'm just wondering if you can address our elementary, and I know that that's only 1 year where we're seeing that huge growth in the number of students that were reclassified in both districts, or I should say in both levels now. But do you see that elementary has a tendency to be more reluctant to reclassify?
Yes.
And is that just because of the age of the student, or?
I think there's a few different reasons. The practice had been to wait until they got into 6th grade or perhaps in the junior high. That had been the prevailing philosophy within the district. It wasn't an official protocol, but I believe it touched on it. That particular item was touched on in the board report, the board brief that you received in May, about waiting until 5th grade, 6th grade, or perhaps junior high to redesignate students for fear that the students wouldn't be given the support they needed as they went through their grades, as content became more difficult, as language demands became more difficult. Again, I think it may have come from a genuine place of fear, but I don't agree with the practice.
It was pretty clear, the prevailing thought was that don't reclassify. We'll make that decision in 7th or 8th grade or 9th grade. And the great data that you've pointed out there for the secondaries in last year, 11 and 12, primarily comes from one school.
Can I ask a secondary question? Is it a question about our secondary students, which has to do with one of the criteria, and I remember asking this question a couple of years ago. They have to, students, in order to be reclassified, have to get a C or better in core subject areas, and I distinctly remember a parent saying to me, what about English-only students who say get a D in math because maybe math is not their thing? I mean, is this a state requirement?
No, no.
This is our
These are all
requirement.
locally determined.
Okay, because I had thought we had been told that that was a state requirement and we had nothing to do about that. I mean, if we want to be fair among our students, it doesn't really seem like holding a student who might be very proficient in other areas but might have one subject area in which they don't excel, but their English is fine, to keep them back because of that. So I would like us to reconsider that as well, at least, to keep an open mind.
This completely impacts the flow of students coming to us that are EL designated but can actually qualify to be English. Completely impacts how we build our master schedules and where we place students and who we put in front of them. So solving this problem helps at least secondaries tremendously. And this will be a discussion item this week on our principal leadership team meeting that Ben, Emilio, and I will facilitate with all of our principals. And it will include the criteria.
Well, I just want to, I appreciate the fact that this is coming forward, because I think the very fact that we're discussing it in an open meeting will help the whole district staff, I mean, not just the public, but the district staff as well, to understand that this is something that we're taking seriously. And I'm wanting to give the schools and the staff the benefit of the doubt. And in the elementary district, I'm wondering if it's possible that the teachers don't really grasp the impact that it has on the students' future academic placement when they keep them classified as ELLs. And so I'm hoping that that I think it was suggested already that there be more training and information to make sure that the teachers are aware of that and to help them understand the implications it bears for the students. And then once we're comfortable that that has been taken care of, then we can kind of rule that out as a possibility. The other thing is that I'm hoping, and I can't remember if this is on the single site plans or not, but if it isn't, I would like to see this included in the single site plans so that every school knows that they're going to have their numbers looked at every year.
It's a great idea.
That's a great idea.
And I know those are coming up, so.
Sure are.
We think they should be part of that as well.
Okay. And I had one last question, which now seems kind of minor, but the level where it says parent opinion and consultation, are there ever cases where the student actually makes it all the way through the process, including the teacher evaluation, and the parents don't want them reclassified?
I've never actually experienced that.
Okay.
I'm not certain, and I don't want to speak for everyone else. I've never encountered that. It's been more of a celebration.
Okay, okay, great. Yeah, because I was noticing that at that point, the no side ended. And so I kind of was assuming that parents would not object.
It's always been a celebration wherever I've
Okay,
been.
okay, great, thank you.
Well, I think you have a feel for the board's sentiment, so it's
Thank
pretty
you.
clear, and glad
Thank you
you're
very
going to
much.
pursue this.
Thank
And
you.
Dr. Cash, can you provide maybe in a board brief, just feedback on how the meeting goes with the principals? Because I'd be very interested to hear just their take on this.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, we're moving on to our last conference agenda item, update on the board activities on the Teleq construction management. And is Mr. Coltrip, is that here?
He's here, but I'm
Last
going
man standing.
Yeah, I
Dr.
wanted to
Cash.
introduce him, and he's going to be available to answer any specific questions, but I'm going to take the lead in this presentation. And I want to start by sharing with you that the amount of material that was on the attachment and is on the on the district's website is a small part of the work that they've done to date, and I'll go over that in a second. There's so much detail in here that I thought might be one of those get lost in the details sort of things. So instead, what I really wanted to do was to give you a sample of what the work that they've been done, kind of a slice as opposed to the whole pie. If you're interested in the whole pie up to this particular point, well, I can certainly give you one of these, and you can see, as I'll share with you, they've actually, Kelly and his crew have actually rated one of the major systems is roofing, has actually rated every roof in our district. So, and it's a massive spreadsheet with a lot of data and a lot of good information that will be very helpful for us in planning. What we asked them to do initially was to really look at our facilities and help us understand our current assessment of our facilities. And one of the things that Teleq has done a tremendously good job is meet with the people on the ground, the users of our systems, the repairers of our systems, the maintainers of our systems, the people who are actually involved in the day-to-day operation of our facilities, and get their input. They have met with contractors, all the major vendors that provide us the facility services and provide products to our district. And they are doing an assessment of each individual campus, and the one that you have before you is a sample of Santa Barbara Junior High. So you would know that each school's data would be reflective of what Santa Barbara Junior High looks like. And then they're also looking at major systems, like I said, in what they've done so far, and in here is the roofing, and then the HVAC, I think, is almost complete in here. And it's incredible detail that we haven't had ever or in a long time. Never. And I mean, I was just looking at the roofing stuff that's in there, which I didn't give you copies of, but you're more than welcome. I can pass this along if you'd like to look at how the roof at the B wing at Santa Barbara Junior or Dos Pueblos is doing. What I found, what was really helpful was the ranking of the roofs and giving them on a rubric, kind of assigning them a number value as to where they would be in relationship to all the rest of the roofs in our district and where they would be in relationship to a good roof, which is what we want, you know, all our roofs and all the systems to be performing. So that is a major part of what they've done so far. In addition to that, what they have done is begun, and maybe you're close to completing, the reconciliation of our funds and how we've expended them from measures Q and R as well. And that's been a lot of work, and I didn't include that, but that's a lot of financial data, which when we're all done, obviously you'll see all of this. But that was also a huge project in working with our business services, Julie Abnett, the bond accounting person as well. And then addition to that, they have begun work and are close to completing an analysis of all the probable projects or possible projects that were listed many years ago when measures Q and R were passed. These are the list of And so this is what this project is. This is how it's been assessed so far. Here's the estimated cost of completing that project. I would say you're about halfway done with this, or a little more than halfway done? Okay. And so the level, I mean, you can see the level of detail is really fantastic. And I was trying to decide, and Kelly and Dave probably got the brunt of my decision making, because I was trying to figure out, well, you know, how much information do you guys really, I mean, how much data is like too much and how much is not enough? So I went with kind of the smaller slice this time, with the hope that if you wanted more very specific data, either about a school or about a system, that you could just ask it and, you know, get it from Dave or Kelly or me, and we would just email it to you or send it to you, and you could see a more complete data analysis. Nevertheless, you're going to get it all for every single school. It'll probably be a couple of notebooks, I would guess, probably, yeah. Susan and Annette, you probably won't be able to read that, or it'll be public information, so you can read it if you wanted to. But I hope that you found the information. One of the things I also like about the way the data got presented was that it's readable for an average Joe like me. I don't have to have Kelly and Dave's level of knowledge and skills and knowing a lot of facility things, so it's helpful for the users in the building. And this is something that Dave and Kelly and I have worked really hard on, and that is making sure that the people at the schools know what we're talking about, we know what they're talking about, and we reflect back to them in language that's understandable to them. That's what we've done so far. I think we're well on our way to getting what I hope to be a very valuable document for us that will help in planning our current bond projects, which we would bring back to you from that list and say, here's what we thought we wanted to do. Here's what kind of the assessment data shows us may be a different path for us to take in light of what we're learning about our facilities. So what projects do you guys want to do? So with that, the three of us are here to answer any questions.
I have to say that I really liked the approach of giving us a slice of one school, because there was so much here just at Santa Barbara Junior High to look at. And, you know, having been so many times in that school, in the Luke Theater, in the Globe Room, and not realizing that the roof is completely crumbling around the school, you know, it's frightening, really, the level of disrepair. And I added up all the amounts, and it's over $13 million to do just the work at Santa Barbara Junior High. So there's going to be some major decision-making going on. Mrs. Parker.
Yes, I know that this document will end up being used long-term, and not just for Q&R, frankly. It'll be a lot of district maintenance funds. I just, in getting ready for when the full report comes out, I wanted to ask, what is the FIT report and the FIT score?
That's the facility inspection.
You need a mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Well, Dave knows that as well as I do, but I'm going to take it. If you go to your board, your facilities page on your website.
Not on.
Still not on? I can't even see it.
Try this one.
Okay, is that on now?
No.
I think Dr. Grotti's is on.
Hello, there we go.
That's-
The facilities inspection tool, you can see it on the facilities website, on the school district's website, facilities page. It'll be under the heading, I believe it's reports and reports. You'll find it quite readily. Every site has one, and periodically what happens is Bruce Chavez and someone else from your facilities goes out and they look at the site and they grade it on different criteria, different areas they look at, and there's a numerical computation of where it falls. So I simply took those as a reference of when was the last time this school was looked at and how was it rated and what they saw as problems.
Okay, thank you. And then my one other question, just on sort of the way the data is presented. The facility's initial priority rating from July 30th, 2012. And I see there's so much that needs to be done at each site that I wasn't positive, and maybe this is a question for Mr. Hetjank, when I see numbers like 22, 39, 41, is that, I kind of need to know, is that in relation to a list that's 500 projects long that include the entire district? Is it, that there are 50 things that need to happen just at Santa Barbara Junior High?
This was the pared down list that we knew would far surpass the amount of bond funds that we were going out for. So we did not go any further than this list. So basically right now, what was on that list, even before the Telecu report Telecu started their assessment, we were well aware that we were oversubscribed because we went with an amount of money that would not raise the tax rate versus an amount of money that we needed to do all the projects on that list. Those were priority projects that were basically identified by facilities, maintenance, and the school sites put together. So we know that we're not going to get through that whole list with the current capital projects that we have approval from the voters.
So,
Oh, yeah, and a lot of, thank you, Kelly, yes. A lot of those projects were carryovers from Measure V and Measure I-98, ones that we didn't have enough funding to complete, such as the libraries at Washington and Adams.
so I just wanted to clarify, so the numbers represent district-wide?
The numbers represent a priority that was assigned 2 years ago by facilities and planning.
For the whole district,
Yeah,
though?
yeah,
Okay.
in consultation with schools and school principals.
In this particular case, since you're looking at a secondary school, this is secondary only, does not include primary. There's a separate list for primary.
Is there a master list someplace? I don't know that we ever made a master list. Maybe facilities did, but we didn't rank every single project on that wish list.
No, you didn't. That was our rank that we used to bring projects forward for your approval in consultation, like I say, with the
Yeah,
superintendent and schools.
we
But
approved
you-
a certain number for the first bond issue and the second bond issue, but this goes beyond that, and there's a master list of.
The district, the board has not approved a priority number for the projects, nor have we asked the board to approve
But
one
we gave you
yet.
good direction, though.
Yeah. We've been bringing projects that we feel were critical to be done first, asking you to approve those.
Right.
That priority list is an internal list. It's not been board approved, and before we bring projects forward, we always discuss them with the site principals and Dr. Cash, and as far as why we're bringing something forward at this time, as far as critical need in the schedule.
Okay. How many items are on that list that's out there? Here we've got 39, 41, 58. Pardon? Yeah.
I know the answer to that one. On the secondary list, there's roughly 80 projects listed in various stages, from things that are already have been in various stages of completion with design, and some that are submitted to DSA for approval. Design's partway completed, maybe some of the work's done already because it's a phased project. And then below the line of, say, 8, starting at 7, and then down to about 80 in the case of secondary. In the case of primary, the number is more in the 90 range.
As you go through your process, are you finding things that aren't on that list, and are you adding to it?
It's a byproduct of the assessment process. The answer is yes. And Dr. Cash made a really good observation that we could just bog you down with a ton of information now. Like my wife says, she asked me what time it is, and I build her a watch. I'm afraid that's just the sort of person I am. But in like, for example, looking at these roofs, we've been on every single roof in the district. I don't mean just looking at them, I mean on them, walking them. And in the course of doing that, I'm finding out, okay, this mechanical system needs this, and this waterproofing issue is over here. And so there will be an additional compilation of things that are system-related, mechanical system-related, waterproofing system-related, that may not necessarily be on a numerical list.
Oh, thank you.
Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yes, it does.
If I could add one thing, Mr. Herron, as a result of Telecu's work, I'm positive that we will be coming back to the board wanting to add a couple things to the list that are critical, that may have been overlooked or we didn't know about, or were discovery items.
Yes.
Mrs. Cordero?
Well, I just wanted to sort of piggyback on Mr. Herron's question, which was, does the board set the priorities? When we dealt with, I think it was the Measure V priorities, maybe, the board did have input into what some of the priority criteria were. So, for example, projects that were needed to comply with ADA were were a top priority. Projects that could generate matching funds were a higher priority. So I don't recall that we have gone through that discussion again, have we?
We've not gone through that discussion. We have applied for matching funds with the state of California. Our applications are in, and the Office of Public School Construction and State Allocation Board, it hasn't come up on their agenda yet, but we've applied, we've filled out all the paperwork. Right now, there's what's called an unfunded project list, and they're not adding any more schools projects to the unfunded list because the state is afraid that when they use the word unfunded, then they're on the hook to fund it at some point. So they're starting a new list with a new name of projects waiting to be put on a funded list rather than calling them unfunded. So that's where our state matching fund is gone. We have hit most of our critical projects as far as ADA compliance in the first part of this bond issue that weren't addressed in the
Okay, but
previous one.
I just want to interrupt because I don't want to, debate which should be the highest priority. I'm just wondering, do you have a set of criteria by which you determine what the highest priorities, the ranking, and is it something that you could share, like in a board brief with the board?
Yeah, we can give you that criteria we've used so far, and we hope to come back when Telecu finishes and have you help us establish a stricter criteria and actually prioritize these projects.
That's the plan, to get to the question that both you and Mr. Herron asked, and that is.
I mean, we did go through the process where
Right.
we had the grid with
Yes.
ADA, preservation. There were 5 different categories, I think, and we X'd it.
Correct.
And we came up with, this one has 4 X's, this has 3 X's, this has 2 X's. So we had a general.
Yeah, we use that as a rough guide, but we also brought up a lot of things that may have only had one X, like our networking and all the work that the contractors and ITS has done to get our systems with wireless. So we use that as a general guide, but there were things that were 1s and 2s that definitely got moved up because they were critical.
I'm glad we've been talking about state matching funds. I believe it's Prop 39, now I'm forgetting exactly which one of the initiatives that passed, provided with funding for schools, for retrofitting, for solar panels and things like that. So we need to be all over those kinds of additional sources of funding. Regarding that, when I look at Santa Barbara Junior High, which we know is a beautiful historic building and yet its windows are literally falling apart, we've determined, I guess, that they should be replaced with wooden windows to respect the historic status. But are there creative ways to tap into alternative methods of daylighting, of using light that you don't have to pay for to illuminate the classrooms?
Yes, a lot of times when we redo roofs or build a new structure, we always look at daylighting, and you'll see that on our restrooms that are being added at Peabody and Adelante that just received DSW approval.
Oh, good.
Those restrooms should be able to be used during the daytime without any lights on. They're being designed with natural light and natural airflow. So we're constantly looking for buildings that meet the LEED criteria and would be LEED qualified but not certified due to the cost of certification. And all of our architects have been given that direction. So we're trying to build the most energy efficient envelope we can, whether it be in new construction or a retrofit. And we're always looking at ways to increase daylight into an area, because we have some areas that are dark that definitely need daylight, whether it be through windows, whether it be through skylights, and other creative ways that our architects come up with of getting light into areas.
Right.
And I would also say that this is at least what I've learned so far, an area of expertise that Telecu has as well in green construction and green technology.
Definitely.
You know, I'm happy to hear that. And also, and yet we're adding new technology, display methodology that requires rooms occasionally to be darkened. And so there, you know, there's that kind of push and pull between, you know, lighting that meets the task at hand. It's a big job, so.
So my goal is to bring back periodically, and we'll do probably one more progress report, and then we'll have the finished product. But if any of you would at any time like to see the deeper dive, you know, you can schedule time with Kelly, Mr. Coltrop. He's has an office on the second floor, a place where he hangs out when he's in our district. And he can share that with you, and or I can certainly, if you would like to, I can loan to one of you this evening this binder that you could take home with you if you'd like to look at those the systems at this particular point. So.
Okay, well, thank you very much. This is.
If I could make one comment, I think the district, my staff is pleased that Teleku has chosen Kelly to be their representative. He works really well with all the site principals. He has great communication skills, works really well with district staff, and he has the experience and knowledge. And all of those things coming together are critical in having the right person. And so we're very happy that they picked Kelly for our district.
Yeah.
Great. Well, it's an inventory I know we all want to see, but it's the price tag is going to be beyond belief, I think, when it's all added up. Thanks again. So we're going to move, let's see, we had one consent agenda item, F4, that we were going to come back to. Mr. Herron?
Yeah, real quick. I'm just curious. This is something new. I'd just like a little bit more information of what it is, where it came from, what experience have we seen, other people using it, has special ed been involved in it, and what does it, it looks like it's another math program, plus other things too, but just where did it come from and how did it emanate and why are we doing it? And
Well, ClassWorks is a program that has been approved by a national special education committee or commission, if you will. They deliver a product, or they offer a product that will allow students, somewhat like our Read 180 program, where they can diagnose students' areas of need and give a student on a one-to-one basis, online, it's internet-based, to focus on those areas and those skills that they're most deficient in. For a special ed teacher, it's real important that they be able to pinpoint not only the area that students are deficient in, but also the area in which their IEP goals are set, so that teachers, special ed teachers, can program the system for a particular student in their particular goal area where they need to show progress, and get an online instructional program that will help that student develop those skills on a one-on-one basis, not only in their classroom, but also at home. The system allows, it not only diagnoses and provides this online instruction, if you will, but also gives a readout that provides a teacher with the kind of information that they've had to usually document on a handwritten, or create a document that can show the amount of time a student has spent working on their particular goals, and can demonstrate to an IEP committee whether or not a child is meeting their particular goals in their IEP. We believe that it'll be a program that will allow students better access to working on their goals. It'll provide an online access, a point that they can work on both in the classroom and at home. It will provide special ed teachers with prompt feedback, an ability to really target the instruction and target the support that children receive. And it also provides great documentation and great information, so that when a student or an IEP committee comes together to evaluate the progress of a student, they have really good, solid information in front of them to make those decisions that need to be made for a student.
Have our teachers evaluated it? Is this another burden on them? We're putting another training?
No, we believe this will actually take some off their plate. The documentation of following a student's goals takes up a lot of time. The computer does it, the program does it automatically for them. Myself, and Kirsten Escobedo and John Shetler are special ed directors at this point. Went and visited a couple sites down in Los Angeles with ClassWorks, and they demonstrated to us the impact it's having on not just special ed students, we found, but across general ed, English learners, having a big impact in both academics, but also the opportunity to work at home and continue to develop their skills. John and Kirsten and I came back very, very intrigued about this program because Dr. James Rivet had presented to our principals on two different occasions, and we weren't able to get the information we needed. We wanted to see it in practice. So we went to these sites, we met with other administrators, we met with the principals of their sites, and we wanted to try out they testified to the impact it had on, again, not just special ed students, but also their greater populations. So we felt that instead of rolling out this huge district-wide program, we want to just pilot it in 3 different sites, in 2 elementaries, at Adams School, and at Franklin, and at Santa Barbara Junior High, only targeting those special ed students. We have to sign off on a 3-year contract, but we can terminate it after a year if we don't see the type of progress that we believe we should see after a year.
Are those 3 principals in tune with it? And
Yes, they are. They're very excited.
Thank you.
Last year, when Dr. Rivet presented this to the elementary principals, when Mr. Handel was a principal, every single elementary principal wanted to start it immediately. And we had to go, well, this is really interesting. And then Mr. Handel, took the next step, which was, let's see it in action. So that's
the important answer to my question.
That's
That
how
is.
it's transpired, yeah, exactly like that.
Thank you. I'll move that we approve the ClassWorks pilot program at Adams, Franklin, and Santa Barbara Junior High School.
Thank you.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? No. Motion passes 5-0.
Appreciate it.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
that explanation. I think we've talked pretty much about coming events, although I'm not sure where we're going to talk about the special board meeting we're having. I guess it could be under future, well, it's a hybrid of.
It's a coming event.
Okay, it is a coming event. Board members, we do know we want to come back one more time and put the final polish on our strategic plan while this board is still intact. So the first week of December has been proposed as a possible time frame for that, and I guess at this point we'd like to find a date that works. That I believe December the 4th was originally suggested, and Mrs. Cordero, that worked for you. Was that correct?
I'm sorry, it can.
Was there a
don't-
better date?
I don't know that's a Tuesday, and I don't know what people's schedules are like that Thursday, which is December 6th.
I do know the Santa Barbara Education Foundation is planning their kind of A and B victory party, I believe, for this. No, they've moved it now.
I
Okay.
actually have a conflict on Thursday evening
Okay.
at UCSB.
Okay, I can do Tuesday.
Is there a time that's better for you?
Well, we had talked about
4 o'clock?
4 o'clock. 4 o'clock would be the earliest I could possibly do it.
How about 4:15?
4:15 is even better.
How much time is estimated?
I'm hopeful that 2 hours would be sufficient.
Because I know you have a special ed meeting that night.
I do. I'm going to be your keynoter.
Wednesday, the 5th is also.
Yeah, Wednesday unfortunately is
No,
out for me. Unless we want to do it later. I teach until 6th.
Well, would that be better for you? I mean, we could do an evening.
Tuesday is the best for me.
Yeah, I work on Wednesday nights.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, Tuesday's fine for
Tuesday,
me. Tuesday's fine at
4:15.
4:15.
Okay. All right. Well, that stays in line with where we had originally talked about putting it. And we are really looking forward to seeing that final draft.
Well, you should get a copy of it this week for sure, I hope.
Is that
Soon.
December 4th, did we say?
And you've been coordinating with
Okay.
Mrs. Parker and Ms. Limon on that, or?
And we needed the next draft before we talked
Okay.
about it, and I'll probably have to weigh in on it via email.
Okay, all right. All right, well, I believe that's that. Mrs. Cordero?
That's-
Bring the hammer down.